Hello and welcome once again to another exciting episode of Born Psyched. As you can probably tell by my voice, I've still not quite got over my cold yet, but I will endeavour to keep making these videos as best as possible. In this episode, we will continue to examine the topic of attachment, but this time we will be focusing on specific studies of animals and how they can explain various attachment behaviours. As I stated earlier, we will be examining various animal studies and how they link to attachment. The two animal studies we're looking at today are Lorenz's study of imprinting in goslings and Harlow's study of affection in monkeys. Before we start though, we need to consider why psychologists study animals at all, when the ultimate aim is to understand human behaviour. First of all, there are a number of experimental situations where it is impractical, immoral, or illegal to test on humans, so animals have to be substituted in. Secondly, it is usually a lot more cost-effective to test on animals. This is due to the fact that animals' breeding cycles are a lot shorter than humans. To create a new human takes approximately 9 months, whereas rodents only take a matter of weeks. Additionally, animals mature at a much faster rate, meaning you can test on fully developed animals much sooner. The first study we need to look at was carried out by Konrad Lorenz in 1935. He was interested in how we can generalize animal behavior to humans. He was, after all, an ethologist, which is what they do. This experiment tested the concept of imprinting, that is, the tendency to form a very strong attachment in the moments after birth. This concept is demonstrated in humans. When a child is born, after the medical team have assured the child is healthy, it is immediately handed over to the mother to allow that bond to start to form. Lorenz wanted to test this concept with goslings. He incubated 1/2 of a clutch of goslings to ensure he was the first thing they saw when they hatched. As you can see from the image, this had a powerful effect, as the goslings followed him around his farm as though he was their mother. To test this behaviour, he placed all of the goslings in a room together with the rest of their nestmates. In one corner he placed himself, and in the other the gosling's true mother. To identify the incubated goslings, he marked them all with a harmless dye. When the goslings were allowed to wander freely, he immediately found that the non-incubated goslings graduated towards their mother, and the incubated goslings headed towards Lorenz himself, suggesting that imprinting had taken place. Now from this, Lorenz was able to conclude that imprinting behaviour is obviously valid, but also it's restricted to a very early time after birth, what psychologists often refer to as the critical period. That being said, that attachment must occur within that time frame or it doesn't occur at all. He also suggested that animals could imprint on the first persistently present moving object seen at the time of birth. Now, there are reports, and I've tried to find some information on this, it's somewhat uncorroborated, that he tested this particular theory as well by incubating goslings again, but this time instead of presenting himself, what he actually presented was waving a rubber chicken around or a welly, and to understand whether or not the goslings would actually imprint on that item instead. Now there are mixed reports, but some say he was actually successful there. However, if the goslings were to attach to either himself or other objects as opposed to their natural mother, there are arguments that there are some long-term effects. First of all, according to Lorenz, this imprinting is irreversible. long-lasting, however you want to talk about it. That means that once this bond is formed, it cannot be broken. And that makes quite a big deal, considering they are not attaching to their natural mother. As a result, a lot of research does suggest that early attachments do affect later relationships, and in animals' case, mating behaviour. Now, what this therefore suggests is that animals' mating behaviour is somewhat more abnormal, as they would tend to mate with the same object that they imprinted on. The other study we're going to examine is that of Harlow 1959. Now, while Lorenz was fairly harmless, in terms of no harm was actually put towards the animals, there's a bit more controversy surrounding Harlow. So, what he was hoping to do was to try and demonstrate that attachment was purely based on feeding. This is very much in line with the learning theory of attachment that we're going to examine in a later video. So, to test this, he created 2 wire monkeys. As you can see in the picture, one of which was just simply wire. It did have a feeding bottle attached to it occasionally, whereas the other one was wrapped in some sort of soft cloth. Now, he separated baby rhesus monkeys, as you can see the type of monkey in the picture, into 2 separate groups. One where they attached the feeding bottle to the wire monkey, the other to the cloth monkey. And he wanted to understand how often, or how long, should I say, the monkeys spent with each mother. And also, he wanted to look at other forms of attachment behaviour, testing potential secure base behaviour, stranger anxiety in animals. Now, what he found was quite interesting. Now, despite whether the wire monkey was given the feeding bottle or not, the majority of the infant monkeys spent the vast majority of time with the cloth mother. They may have gone to the wire mother to feed, but then immediately gone back to the cloth mother. When he introduced a mechanical bear, now the one that you see in the image was quite tame in comparison. There is a video that I will leave a link for in the description for you to look at later, which I would imagine would be quite a little bit more traumatic to the infant monkeys. But all of the monkeys, should I say, clung to the cloth mother when frightened, as opposed to the wire monkey. Now, this is hopefully for reassurance, just so they can feel a little bit more comforted. What Harlow was able to conclude from this was that the food itself wasn't necessary for them to form this attachment, but instead it's this ability to find comfort that is more important. Now, like with Lorenz, there are significant long-term effects. What he found is that as the monkeys grew up, they did develop a lot of negative consequences. They weren't as social as such, and additionally, they also experienced certain sexual abnormalities like the goslings did in Lorenz's study. First thing I need to talk about, though, if we're going to evaluate these studies, there is one really important term that you do need to be aware of, and that is this. Whenever you test on animals with the attempt to generalize those findings to humans, you are being comparative. It's a very, very important term you need to remember for your exams. You can argue that this is overly comparative because it is attempting to generalize simple animal behavior to the much more complex behavior of humans. You can elaborate to your heart's content on there, but it is really important you do remember this term. Let's look a little bit more specifically at some evaluation points of each study then. So let's start with Lorenz's gosling study. There are a few evaluation points, but not all of them are positive. In fact, very few of them are positive. First of all, you can suggest that his study demonstrated that attachment was innate. Now, as such, this provides excellent research support for Bowlby's monotropic theory that, again, we're going to examine in future videos. Now, the main assumption of that theory was that attachment was innate, and the fact that Lorenz was able to demonstrate this with imprinting only goes to support that. When you look at limitations, however, as I said earlier, there are a lot of difficulty when it comes to generalizing the findings to humans. Goslings and humans, very, very different species, and what may be true of one species might not necessarily be true of the other. Additionally, many of his findings have been questioned, specifically the permanency of the impact of this imprinting, specifically relating to mating behaviour. It is suggested that while they may have tried to mate with the items they imprinted on, eventually they realised that this is unsuccessful and then tried to mate with members of their own species. This is counteracting Lorenz's original point that imprinting is permanent, long-lasting, etc. Now, when we examine Harlow's monkeys research, when you talk about the theoretical value, the common idea of attachment was that feeding was the most important method to get someone to attach. This research actually proves that that is not correct, and therefore more attention should be paid to how much comfort a parent provides. Additionally, from a practical point of view, it also helps social workers and other professionals to identify cases of abuse and neglect, thus being able to prevent damage before it becomes quite serious. When it comes to limitations, however, this does follow the same problem of Lorenz. Well, obviously, like with Lorenz, it's hard to generalize the findings to humans. What you can say, however, is because it used rhesus monkeys, chimps, etc., because they are much more similar to humans, that the findings are slightly easier to generalize. More controversial, though, is the number of ethical issues surrounding Harlow's research. Now, be very careful here about trying to apply human ethical issues to animal studies here. You can argue, yes, he was harming the animals in some way, but that's not the same extent that we would apply to humans. You've got to understand that when we're considering animal ethics, we've got to think about the greater good. Is what he is able to establish worth the stress that he's placing the animals under? Now, a number of different exam questions that can link to this. I've taken this next exam question from the June 2016 AS paper. That's paper 1, by the way. So, it's given a description of researcher A and researcher B. You can probably see where this is going already. Apparently, researcher A found that young animals seem to attach for comfort rather than food. That sounds familiar. Whereas researcher B found that mobile newborn animals would follow the first large moving object they saw. Even without reading further on, you can understand probably what they're going to ask next. So, then you have to say, give the name of researcher A and state the type of animal studied. Now, obviously, researcher A was Harry Harlow, and the type of animal studied were rhesus monkeys. Now, for the purpose of this exam question, I'm willing to bet that the examiner will accept monkeys. Researcher B was obviously Lorenz, and the type of animal studied by this researcher was goslings. There are numerous reports of people, instead of saying goslings, will say ducklings instead. Realistically, the original study should always refer to goslings. It may depend upon how generous the examiner would be, whether they would credit ducklings or not. So best play safe then. Okay, guys, I've hoped you found this particular episode useful. I will continue to do these videos as regularly as possible. Okay, if you want to subscribe, please click the link. I've also included two video links in the description below that looks at both Harlow's study and Lorenz's study, so please feel free to give those a watch as well. I would also appreciate as many comments as possible. I'm always endeavouring to improve these videos and welcome any feedback possible. Okay, thanks for listening, guys. I will catch you later. Bye now.